Okay, welcome to Manch University, or Manchu, or FU, the exciting alternative to the Confucius Institute. I'm the founder, Sarto, and today I'd like to talk, welcome to our little fireside chat here. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about a book, do a quick kind of review of a book here called In Order to Live by Yeonmi Park. Just completed this book. I came across Yeonmi Park's story first through China Uncensored, and then through PragerU, where Dennis Prager had a fireside chat with Yeonmi, and I thought her story was very compelling, so I decided to buy the book. And my feelings are, what are my first impressions? Well, first of all, we say Fu Manchu. Movie poster here, I just want to talk about that real quick. This idea that Fu Manchu is a sort of offensive stereotype is absolutely absurd, or the idea that, you know, a Caucasian race was appropriating Asian races by having Caucasian actors play Asian characters. That's all bunk. That's completely absurd, because during that time when these films like Fu Manchu were being made, and mind you, Fu Manchu is actually a very sort of intelligent, sort of anti-hero in some stories. He's quite an intelligent character, intelligent villain, so I really don't see where it's derogatory in any sense, other than he's the bad guy, and there's just as many, even in that era, there's just as many good Asian detectives as there are sort of the Fu Manchu character. But what I want to say about this idea that, having, white people playing yellow faces, it's called, that's absurd, because during that era, there wasn't a large Asian audience going to see these films, going to see Hollywood films. So what you had was basically an industry, and this is true of capitalism, you had an industry that was catering to its audience. And one of the criteria for being a good actor has always been the ability to portray someone other than yourself. So when these actors were playing people from other races, it was kind of a challenge to their abilities and skills, and that's all it was meant to be. This idea that they were like, oh, we were going to steal from them is absurd, because these studios were trying to create names around certain actors and give them sort of credibility, and they were going by the criteria by which made you a good actor, which was like, can you portray somebody realistically, other than who you are. Today that's very different. Today we just have celebrities. It's just about fame and being who you are. Reality of what acting today is just people not acting. And so it's quite absurd. But these films back here, now this poster here, I don't have it. I have it basic because it's a very cool poster, and I got it for like $30, and it's actually a Spanish or Italian poster of Fu Manchu film, and I thought it was quite unique and quite remarkable, and I really liked it, so I decided to buy it and frame it. So that's that. Let's talk a little bit about the book, Yeonmi Park. My feelings about this book was, she's an incredible individual, credible story, and I am 100% advocate of the idea of human rights. But at the same time, when I'm reading this, and I hear this in her own discussions about, coming from North Korea and what she sees today happening in, the free world, I can't help but feel like this is like exactly the kind of propaganda, that she's being drawn into that sort of cynical, crass world of human rights, or freedom, which we're seeing today. She's, in hearing her talk and her conversation, she's astounded by like sort of, America taking away liberties, and censoring people, and that was exactly what, that was kind of the oppressive regime in North Korea was doing, and how she's astounded that that in the free democratic world, these kinds of things are going on. So I see that, and she's still a young girl, so she's coming to the realization of like, the industry is it doesn't really care, it doesn't really care. Like you read about her, she has a great deal of shame concerning, being a sex slave or being a cam girl. And, but she comes to the West and these things are celebrated, like the girls with OnlyFans accounts and all that, they're considered really sort of, sophisticated women these days, or, very sort of clever or very sort of attractive and power players or whatever, feminine, like all this garbage. And she must just feel like, what, like, where are these values, like they have no values. And she's kind of getting, like this is like the perfect book for that liberal-minded person, it has that like, oh, she was a prostitute, so there's something titillating in it, and, certainly she's young and attractive, so that, helps draw attention to her person. And she must, at the same time as I wonder, like, what good does it do? Like she's gonna come out probably pretty wealthy, pretty well established because of this. But like in the bigger picture, it's like it almost seems to undermine this idea of human rights in a lot of ways, because it just says, you're free to be awful, or like people are free to treat you awful at the same time. And another thing you notice is that, like, in talking about Kim Jong-il at that time, I wonder how she feels about Kim Jong-un also. She doesn't ever really speak about Kim Jong-un, but because he wasn't in power when she was living in North Korea. But you get that same, like they create celebrities in the same manner, as they sort of created this sort of ideal, godlike figure of the Kim family in North Korea. They use the same sort of mechanism, same sort of strategies in a lot of ways to create this idea, like in America where celebrities are experts, or if you're on TV or you're being paid to do it, suddenly you're an expert, and you could just be somebody that was kind of, a troubled sort on the streets for the most part. And suddenly you're an expert because people are paying you. And you see that sort of parallel. And it's actually quite frightening in a lot of ways. Or I just can see how, like, China can undermine democracy by seeing that, well, you don't realize how similar you really are to us, and having people from the Western world sort of succumb to that, like, really we aren't, wealth does that to people, and that's just how it is, kind of idea. But, she was raised in, like, traditional values, and like, she conveys that, like, those values actually meant something to her. On the other part, like, she talks about, like, her family was smugglers, in North Korea. And I'm like, that's not really smart people, That's not, like, you're not being very smart on those terms, being a smuggler. And in a lot of respects, I felt it was a very Chinese story, having spent 10 years in China. I mean, it's good that she exposes, like, how awful the Chinese are, how much they exploit, how much they take advantage of North Koreans, and the fact that, like, Western media just totally ignores that to sort of, like, pander to China is just kind of despicable, It's like you ignore this whole dynamic just for the sake of for the sake of contriving your sort of political virtues, and that's really kind of offensive in a lot of ways, and I'm sure she probably finds it offensive also. Like, why are you ignoring that just because you want to make money in China? But that's capitalism. And like I was saying, like, you know, like, here's her story. It's like the perfect, like, liberal mindset of today. It caters exactly to that. And sort of like, well, you know, she was a smuggler, you know, like a drug dealer, and she was a prostitute, and all these, like, sort of illicit sort of details that sort of are titillating to that liberal audience. You know, it sort of plays right into that. And like I say, you're left with that feeling like, what good is, you know, what good will it do, you know, in the long run? You know, these people are just kind of like getting off, you know, just playing for the sensation of it. You know? So, I'm sure I can understand her sort of disconnect. And you know, she's getting right. She's a very intelligent person, and I wonder how she's going to sort of reconcile things that I myself couldn't really reconcile with this industry, in the sense of, you know, you have capitalism and then you have a morality, you know, you have values. You have capitalism, you have values. And one of the ideas I was thinking of recently was that a lot of people come to America, you know, and they seek success through morality or they seek success through immorality. And America seems to offer those two sort of opportunities, you know. The people who come here, like Yeonmi Park, are, you know, they look for success through morality. They're like, I came from a very corrupt place, you know, and I was trying to get away from all that corrupt, you know, behavior and that sort of immorality. And I came to a place that I thought that success could be made by, you know, moral behavior. But you see less and less in that, and certainly I would say with the Democrats' sort of position, you have success through immorality. Like, oh, you can also be successful in America by being a cheat, lie, and a crook, basically. You can steal, you can come up with the most outrageous lies and just shove them down people's throat and find your success in that way. But I think there was a time when the majority was really that success through morality, and America was a much more moral place in that time, because capital, that was what that's what capitalism was rewarding, and right now capitalism is not rewarding that. It's rewarding immorality for the greatest degree. And that's how you kind of could, and I think the Chinese are clever enough to see that, like, okay, if we, capitalism is just a mechanism, and it can reward, it can raise up a certain group of people, or it can take down a certain, kinds of people based on who you're rewarding, where success comes from. People will go to that path, it's the path of least resistance. And I think with this COVID-19, it really just sort of like tried to even more emphasize that path towards the success or immorality was going to be, that's like how you sort of corrupt capitalism, especially when you're pulling out those checks and balances, when you're trying to debilitate or sort of like when you have agents out there sort of like undermining those checks and balances. We're like, oh, look at now we can, and that's exactly what COVID-19 did, in terms of economy. We're going to try and sort of rip those checks and balances out of the system. So anyway, in order to live, would I recommend reading it? I would say, like, if you're a rational person and you're able to see two sides of a coin, and you're able to see one viewpoint, which says like, oh, which is like the weepy liberal, oh my God, poor woman, and see elements of that are authentic and that are sincere, I would say. But at the same time, if you're able to sort of put it in that perspective, like, this is like propaganda on some extent, and it's just kind of catering to an audience, and there's elements in here that like sort of contradict those feelings of sort of righteousness and virtue, like there's a certain aspect to just making this kind of story being the only kind of story, So if you're able to like sort of weigh and balance those things, I would say definitely recommend this book if you have that kind of intelligence or ability to analyze situations, or situational awareness. If you're able to do that, I would say read this book. If you're not able to do that, stay away from it, because you're just going to fall into the trap. So Yeonmi Park, In Order to Live. It's a book out there. She's a really her story. I mean, certainly North Korea is an issue that is certainly North Korea is certainly sort of a great violator of human rights, and it's a shame that our own country has moved more towards that in terms of sort of trying to create this false idea that Caucasians are racist and all that and basically strip white people of their own human rights. It's a shame that our country is starting to reflect that same sort of North Korean, and you can really see in the when they try to pursue this globalization of the world, this global community, you can really see how these other races that weren't dominant nations just kind of viewed America as a racial sort of entity, and how, even if you're going to pursue this idea of a global community, those races still don't want to dominate it. They want to dominate that global community, and in order to do that, they feel like they have to strip nations of their sort of dominance. But they're completely racial entities. Like China and Africa and nations, they're all very racial entities. So, Yeonmi Park, in order to live. Thanks a lot. Thanks for visiting Fu Manch University. Fu Manch is not just it's a belief. It's like Juche. Fu Manch is it's not so much self-reliance. It's like, since we're a university, we believe in complete dependency. That you have to have self-dependency. Like, find something that is greater than you find something that is greater than you, that will validate you in life, and therefore you will live a more fulfilled life as long as your superiors recognize you or validate you, or money makes you, that's our Fu Manch belief system. It's that alternative also to Juche. I'm Sarto. We'll talk next time at the fireside. Take care.